Out of all the questions that we ask as humans, such as from who we're going to marry to what part of the world we're going to live in to what we're going to do for a career, I think the three greatest questions that any human being can ask are these. Is there a God? Who is God? And what does God want to do with me? Now, to tease this out a little bit, is there a God? Well, to borrow from the scientific data that science grants us, it says that there's an absolute beginning. Or another way to put this, the universe itself has not always been. We see this in what is called the Big Bang Theory. And so, if the universe has not always been, then the question that must be answered is, why is it now? And so, out of all the many arguments for God's existence, such as the four major arguments, is the ontological, the axiological or a moral argument for God, the teleological, which is from design, then there's the cosmological. And it's probably one of my favorite because it really uses the scientific data. That the horizontal cosmological argument says that if something comes into existence, it has to have a cause. The universe came into existence, therefore the universe has to have a cause. Now, William Lane Craig, he's a very big proponent of this argument and uses it often in his debates. But it simply asks the question that if the universe now is, but hasn't always been, why is it? And we see that there would need to be something prior to this to bring it into existence. Now, if we reduce it down to the many levels of knowledge that we have, we see that if a cake comes into existence, we expect that there will be a baker. If a book comes into existence, we would expect there to be an author, a writer. If a building comes into existence, we expect there to be a constructionist or a builder. So if the universe comes into existence, we logically could begin to see that there is a need for at least what we might call a universe maker, i.e. God. Now, what's interesting is there's certain things about the effect that gives us some insight to the cause. So for instance, it takes intelligence to bake a cake. Now, especially if you're a cook like me, it takes a lot of intelligence. But to differentiate between the ingredients, to tell the time, to measure, that's intellectual information. And anytime we see intellectual information in the cause, it always points to an intelligent mind in the causation. So for instance, it takes intelligence to bake a cake. Therefore, we see that the baker is an example of an intelligent mind. We see in a book, intellectual information. An author, intelligent mind. A building, there's intellectual information. We see a builder, intellectual mind. Now, all three examples that I just used are actually within the universe. So the universe itself holds or contains intellectual information. We also see this in the fine-tuning argument all the way down to the 3.5 billion digital codes in the human DNA. So the universe contains information. And again, when there's intellectual information in the effect, it always points back to an intelligent mind, i.e. God. Now that tells us something about the very nature of not only that God is, but who God is. So it takes it out of the realm of pantheism, which says that God's more of just a force like in Star Wars, but it's actually that God is a mind. And when there is a mind, there is intelligence. I like what the very famous scientist that we all would know as Einstein, the great hairdo man. He said that the only incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is in fact comprehensible. And because there is intelligence and order in the effect, we see that there would have to be, logically, an intelligent mind in its causation. So that points us in the direction not only that God exists, but that we see somewhat of a nature of who God is. The second question is who God is. Well, again, that God would have to come to us and reveal that to him. For instance, I heard an example that John Lennox, a professor of Oxford, once used. He says, if we have a cake, going back to a cake example, he said, science can tell us, certain information about the cake, such as physics, the elementary particles, geometry, its dimensions, chemistry, its elements. But the only reason that we can know anything about the cake is why it's there, is it have to come from the baker. And so the baker would have to reveal why they made the cake. So what we find in the second question of who God is that specifically needs revelation, and that's exactly what we find in the Christian message. So the third question that we come to is not, is there a God? Who is God? But what does God want to do with me? And what we find in the Christian message is that you're not a mistake, but that you have real purpose, real meaning, that we've all gone astray, and that God is wanting to deal with every aspect of human existence. And what does God want to do with each one of us? He wants to redeem us because we have gone and done our own thing, but that God loves us. He's motivated by love. He wants to reveal the truth to us and not establish a religion, but a real relationship.